Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're getting into something that I think is super relevant to a lot of us, dementia.
Yeah.
We found this podcast episode, and it's all about how we can take action at the very first sign of dementia.
Okay.
And it's actually pretty amazing. It's packed with some really empowering information.
It should be.
Like, did you know that there are things that we can do that could potentially slow down or even reverse early dementia symptoms?
Oh, no.
I know, right? So get ready because we are about to unlock some serious brain-boosting knowledge with this deep dive.
I think what really struck me when I was listening to this episode was how much it really stressed the importance of taking action early on.
Right.
It's so easy to just brush off those little signs, those subtle signs, and think, oh, it's just part of getting older. But if we actually pay attention and we catch them early on, it can make a huge difference.
It's so true. And they actually give some really relatable examples, like how often do you find yourself just glued to your GPS?
All the time.
Right. Even on routes that you used to know, like the back of your hand.
Yeah.
Or how about this? Have you ever, been in a conversation and you just can't seem to find the right word?
Totally.
Happens to me all the time. And it's like, wait a minute, I know this word. Why can't I think of it?
Oh, for sure. Those are actually like textbook early warning signs that people just kind of tend to miss.
Yeah.
They just don't think anything of it. It's not always like you completely forget things.
Right.
It's more of a feeling that things are just, a tad slower or a little more effortful than they used to be.
Right.
And another red flag the episode talked about was, when you feel more confused than usual.
Yeah, not just like, oh, wait, where were we? But like a real difference from your norm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and then this one I'm totally guilty of. Catching yourself telling the same stories or asking the same questions over and over.
It's so easy to do, though. But it's like our brain trying to tell us something, isn't it?
Right. It's
Yep.
like, hello, pay attention here.
Exactly. And that's where this deep dive gets really interesting because the episode actually frames dementia as this fuel crisis that's happening in the brain.
Okay, a fuel crisis. All right, now you've got my attention. What's that all about?
So imagine your brain cells, right?
Okay.
Those busy little neurons, they're like cars
Okay.
and they need fuel to run, just like cars. And that fuel is glucose, which is the energy that we get from carbs.
Okay.
But sometimes the way that glucose gets to those brain cells, or even just how it's used once it gets there, it gets messed up, it gets disrupted. So those cars, those brain cells, they're like sputtering. They're struggling to get going.
Okay, that is a powerful analogy.
Right.
So, wait, is our brain destined to run on fumes?
Well, not necessarily. And this is where it gets really, really cool. Our brains actually have a backup fuel source. And get this, they actually prefer this backup fuel source.
What? What is it? Tell me.
Ketones.
Ketones. Is this where the ketogenic diet comes in?
You got it.
No way.
When we burn fat for energy instead of carbs, our bodies start producing ketones.
Wow.
And the crazy thing is, ketones can bypass those glucose roadblocks that we were talking about, and they give our brains this clean, efficient energy that they absolutely crave. It's like upgrading to that premium fuel,
That is mind-blowing. So you're saying that by simply changing how we fuel our bodies, we could potentially change how our brains function?
Potentially, yes.
Especially when it comes to something as serious as dementia.
Exactly.
I love it when this stuff just clicks. Okay, so how do we actually make that switch?
Yeah.
How do we go from glucose to ketones? What did the podcast say?
Well, they highlighted a few key things that we can do, and honestly, they're not as difficult as you might think.
Okay.
First up, we got to talk about your diet.
All right, let's talk food. What kind of dietary changes are we talking about here?
So basically, if you significantly lower how many carbs you're eating, you're naturally going to encourage your body to switch into that fat-burning mode. And that means more of those beautiful brain-boosting ketones.
So we're talking about flipping a switch, metabolically speaking.
Exactly.
Our bodies start seeing fat as the main fuel source instead of just relying on those carbs, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the ketogenic diet comes into play, right?
Exactly.
So we're trading in those sugary snacks and all those processed foods for those healthy fats, lean proteins, and I'm sure lots of leafy greens.
You got it.
Amazing.
And it doesn't stop there. This podcast, they were raving about intermittent fasting as the secret weapon to really kick those ketone levels into overdrive.
Intermittent fasting, I've heard about this. It's basically you cycle between eating and fasting periods, right?
Yeah.
You're giving your digestive system a break.
Right.
And it lets your body tap into those fat stores for energy.
Exactly. You're basically hitting the turbo button on your ketone production.
And then for an even more direct boost, they also mentioned things like MCT oil and exogenous ketone supplements. Okay, those sound pretty next level. Can you break those down for me? What exactly
Yeah.
are they?
So MCT oil stands for medium chain triglycerides.
Okay.
And they're basically fats that your liver can quickly convert into ketones. So it's like an instant boost of energy straight to your brain.
Like a quick pick-me-up for your neurons. Got
Exactly.
it.
And then exogenous ketones, those are exactly what they sound like.
Mm.
They're basically just straight up ketone supplements.
Oh, okay.
So they deliver those ketones straight to your body.
So you don't have to wait for your body to make them?
Exactly. You don't have to wait for your body to produce them from fat.
Wow.
It could be a little on the expensive side, but for some people, it's really helpful to just have that direct source.
Yeah.
This is the really wild part. This podcast suggested that these strategies, these changes to your diet, intermittent fasting, even just taking those ketone supplements, they could actually lead to cognitive improvements that are noticeable
Wow.
and potentially even reverse some of those early dementia symptoms.
Are you serious?
I know.
This is incredible.
I know. It's really cool. Now, of course, it's important to remember that this isn't like a magic cure for dementia.
Right.
But what I find so empowering about all of this is that it gives us back a sense of control.
Totally.
It's not like we're just helpless against this condition.
Yeah.
We can actually do things. We can make changes in our lives that can potentially have a huge impact on the health of our brains.
I love that. Taking control of our health destiny, right?
Yes.
I love that. And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, we haven't even gotten into all of it.
Because the podcast didn't just stop at ketones, right?
Of course not. They dove into a whole bunch of other ways that we can support our brain health. Like, did you know there are 3 really important nutrients that play a huge role in brain regeneration and function?
Fill me in. Which ones?
So we're talking about DHA, zinc, and vitamin B1.
Okay, DHA, that rings a bell. That's an omega-3 fatty acid, right?
You got it.
Isn't that the one that we always hear is so good for our brains?
Yes. It's like a building block for healthy neurons.
Oh, wow.
It actually makes up a big part of your brain structure.
Wow.
You can find DHA in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, or if you're vegetarian or vegan, algae oil supplements are great too.
Perfect. So loading up on those brain-boosting omega-3s is definitely a good move.
For sure.
Okay, so what about zinc and vitamin B1? What makes them so important for our brains?
Well, they're both crucial for the hippocampus.
Hippocampus.
Yeah. It's that part of your brain that acts like a central hub for learning and memory.
Oh, okay.
Think of it like your brain's memory library.
Ah, the memory library. Isn't that one of the first areas that's affected by Alzheimer? Right?
Exactly.
Wow.
So making sure you're getting enough zinc and vitamin B1, it's like you're giving that memory library extra protection,
Got it. Protecting the memory library.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we make sure that we're getting enough of these nutrients? What foods should we be looking for?
Well, for zinc, shellfish are your best bet.
Okay.
Oysters especially. Beef, pumpkin seeds are good.
Okay.
You can also find zinc in nuts, legumes, and whole grains.
Okay.
And then for vitamin B1, nutritional yeast is fantastic.
Got it. This is like creating a shopping list for a healthier, happier brain. I can practically feel the synapses firing already.
Me too.
This is great.
And speaking of keeping those synapses firing, the podcast also brought up this other thing that can really affect brain health. Hypoxia.
Hypoxia. Okay, that one sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah, it's not as scary as it sounds.
Okay, good.
So hypoxia basically means that there's a lack of oxygen reaching certain parts of your body.
Oh, okay.
And when it comes to the brain, even a little dip in oxygen can have a big impact.
That makes sense. I mean, our brains are like high-performance machines.
Exactly.
They need a constant supply of oxygen to function at their best.
Exactly. And get this, the podcast actually made a connection between hypoxia and dementia. They were suggesting that this lack of oxygen could actually be contributing to cognitive decline.
Wow, okay. So the question is, how do we combat this whole oxygen shortage in the brain?
Well, the podcast had a really simple answer. Exercise.
Exercise. Really? I mean, I know exercise is good for us in a million ways,
Right.
but how does that help our brains get more oxygen?
It all comes down to blood flow.
Okay.
So when we get moving, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a brisk walk, going for a run, even just some gentle stretches, whatever you're into,
Okay.
you're increasing your circulation throughout your entire body, and that includes your brain.
Oh,
So
okay.
all that blood that's pumping through, it brings a fresh supply of oxygen.
So it's like we're giving our brains this revitalizing oxygen boost every time we move our bodies.
Exactly.
I love it. And it doesn't even have to be some crazy workout at the gym, right?
No, not at all.
It can be small things.
Consistency is key.
Okay.
Even just Short bursts of movement throughout the day make a difference. So park a little bit farther away from where you're going so you have to walk.
Yeah.
Take the stairs instead of the elevator.
Right.
Do some stretches while you're watching TV. Every little thing counts.
Love that. Simple but powerful. It reminds me that, taking care of our brains doesn't have to be this big, complicated thing.
No, not at all.
Okay, so speaking of taking things up a notch, the podcast did mention hyperbaric oxygen therapy and these oxygen restricting exercises, which sound pretty intense.
Yeah, those are definitely more on the advanced side of things.
Yeah.
So hyperbaric oxygen therapy, you're basically breathing pure oxygen in this chamber, this pressurized chamber, and that allows your blood to carry way more oxygen to all your organs, including your brain.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And what about these oxygen restricting exercises? What's the deal with those?
I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does.
But basically, the idea is that by restricting the oxygen to your brain, but only temporarily during exercise,
Okay.
you can actually stimulate the body's natural systems for delivering oxygen and over time make them way more efficient.
Wow, so we're talking about improving our brain's ability to give itself oxygen.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Our bodies are incredible
They really are.
when you give them the right support. Speaking of support, the podcast really emphasized the importance of sleep
Yeah.
when it comes to brain health and this whole oxygen delivery thing.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, who couldn't use more sleep?
Right.
But why is sleep so important, especially when we're talking about dementia?
Well, remember how we were talking about hypoxia being a concern for the brain?
Yeah.
It turns out that sleep disorders, and especially sleep apnea, can actually make hypoxia worse.
Really?
Because what happens is you're literally cutting off your brain's oxygen supply momentarily when you have sleep apnea
Oh, wow.
while you're sleeping.
I had no idea. So not only is sleep apnea interrupting your sleep,
Right.
but it's also potentially depriving your brain of oxygen.
Exactly.
That's definitely something to take seriously.
Yes, definitely. But the good news is that there are actually things that you can do to deal with sleep problems and to support healthy oxygen levels while you're sleeping.
Okay, like what? What did they say? What can we do?
They were big fans of vitamin D. Like I said, it's super powerful for regulating your sleep patterns and for improving brain function.
Vitamin D. Really? I always thought of vitamin D as that sunshine vitamin,
It is.
like the one for your bones and your immune system.
It is all of that.
I had no idea it played a role in sleep and brain health.
It's a multitasker, that vitamin D.
Yeah.
It's involved in so many processes in your body, including your sleep-wake cycles.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so how much vitamin D are we talking here? What did they suggest?
They recommend taking at least 10,000 IUs daily to really support good sleep and good brain function.
Okay.
Of course, it's always a good idea to check with your doctor
Of course. Oh, it's
before you start any supplements.
always, always good advice. It's amazing how everything is connected in our bodies, Like, from the food we eat to the amount of sleep we get, it all has this impact on our overall health,
It really does,
especially when it comes to our brains.
especially when it comes to the brain.
It's fascinating.
And that connection between sleep and brain health, it goes way deeper than just oxygen levels.
Oh, really? What else did they say?
Well, they pointed out that when you're sleep deprived chronically, it actually increases your risk of developing prediabetes and insulin resistance.
Right. Insulin resistance, that's when our cells stop responding as well to insulin.
You got it.
And insulin is the hormone that helps regulate our blood sugar.
Exactly.
Okay.
And here's the thing. Prediabetes and insulin resistance, they're both bad news for your brain.
Oh, no.
And they've actually been linked to an increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia.
So not only can a lack of sleep potentially starve our brains of that oxygen that they need, but it could also lead to all of these other metabolic issues, which can then impact our brain health down the road.
Yeah, it's a domino effect.
Wow. That is a compelling reason to prioritize a good night's sleep.
Right. It all comes back to sleep. Prioritizing sleep, just like getting enough vitamin D, can be a real game changer for your brain health and could potentially even lower your risk of developing dementia.
I am with you 100%. This has been seriously eye-opening. We've learned so much today. We covered the subtle signs of dementia, the power of ketones, those brain-boosting nutrients, strategies to enhance oxygen, and then the huge role that sleep and vitamin D play.
Right.
It's incredible how empowering all of this knowledge really is.
It really is. It shows us that we're not just helpless when it comes to this condition. We can actually take control. We can make decisions that are good for our brains.
We really can. It's about nourishing our brains. It's about fueling them in the right way. It's about creating that environment where they can thrive.
Absolutely. And you know what? That makes me think of a question that I think is really, really thought-provoking.
Okay, so tell me, what's that thought-provoking question?
Well, it's like this. If making these small changes, like cleaning up our diets and trying out intermittent fasting, or making sure we're getting enough sleep and vitamin D, those things can really have a big impact on something as serious as dementia. What other surprising connections are we completely missing when it comes to our health?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. It makes me wonder if maybe we're only just starting to understand how much power we have over our brain health. Like, what if those simple things, the food we choose, how well we sleep, how much we move our bodies, what if those things are even more important than we realize?
Exactly. It really makes
Yeah.
you think about all those other areas of our well-being that could be way more connected than we currently understand.
Right. It's like that old saying, everything's connected. The more we understand those connections, the better equipped we are to take control of our health.
I love that. It's not about being a passenger. We're in the driver's seat.
Yes, I love that analogy.
This whole deep dive has been such a great reminder to stay curious, keep asking questions, and never underestimate those small, everyday choices and how they affect our health.
I agree. This episode has definitely made me more aware, and I hope it's done the same for everyone listening.
Yeah, and another thing that really resonated with me from this episode was how it changed my perspective on dementia.
Right.
It's not necessarily about this inevitable decline.
Yeah.
It's something that we can actually influence.
I agree. That's what I love about all of this. It gives us this feeling that we have options. We're not just helpless.
Right, and it just highlights how much we still don't know about the brain. It's this incredibly complex, mysterious organ, and we're just starting to crack the code.
Speaking of cracking the code, I wanted to circle back to what they said about hyperbaric oxygen therapy and those oxygen restricting exercises.
Yeah,
I found that fascinating.
me too.
Did you want to look into that more?
I definitely do. I've already added it to my research list.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think that we might be able to actually improve our brain's ability to deliver oxygen. It's like we're pushing the limits of what we thought was possible.
Totally. It's like giving our brains that high performance tune up. But for now, I think it's about sticking to the basics that we've talked about.
Absolutely.
So, if you had to pick one important takeaway from all of this, what would it be?
For me, it goes back to the power of prevention.
Okay, yeah.
This episode really made me realize that we don't have to wait until we have symptoms to start taking care of our brain.
Right.
We can be proactive. We can make choices now that will set ourselves up for a healthier brain in the future.
I love that. It's about thinking long term, right?
Exactly.
Thinking about the future of our brain health.
Oh,
So, for everyone listening, just a quick recap. Make sure you're giving your brain those healthy fats and those ketones. Get moving to boost that oxygen flow. And make sleep a priority, guys. It's like a superpower.
yeah.
And hey, don't forget that sunshine or that vitamin D.
Yes. Those are the essentials.
Those are the fundamentals of a brain-healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely. And remember,
Yeah.
knowledge is power.
Yes. This entire episode has been all about arming ourselves with the knowledge that we need to make good choices for our brains.
Exactly. It's been
Huh.
such an insightful deep dive.
It really has. And since we're on the topic of insightful, I'm curious, is there anything that stood out to you in particular from everything that we discussed?
There were so many good points, but I think what really got me was that link between sleep apnea and hypoxia and how it all ties into dementia.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew a little bit about it before,
Right.
but hearing it all laid out like that,
Yeah,
it really makes you think,
it really does.
but how important sleep really is.
Right. It's not just about feeling rested, it's about making sure our brains are getting that oxygen they need.
Exactly. And not just in the moment, but for the long haul.
Yeah. Makes you wonder if we've been looking at sleep all wrong this whole time.
Maybe we have. It's not just about giving our brains a break. It's like prime time
Yeah.
for them to recharge, to repair themselves.
Right.
And when we don't get enough sleep, we could be messing with that whole process.
Wow. It makes you think what other connections are out there just waiting to be discovered.
Right. There's so much we don't know.
For now, I'd say we have a pretty good game plan for how to keep our brains healthy.
I think so.
Right.
And the best part is, it's all about making choices that make us feel empowered.
Absolutely.
We're not just along for the ride here. We actually have a say in how this whole brain health thing plays out.
I love that. Taking control of our brain health destiny.
Yes.
So, to everyone listening, what are you waiting for? Go grab some brain-boosting foods, get those bodies moving, and maybe think about going to bed a little early tonight. Your brain will definitely thank you.
Absolutely. And remember, guys, this is a journey, right?
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. There's always something new to learn, some new connection to be made.
And always new ways to support our amazing brains. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible deep dive. Keep those brains healthy. And until next time, stay curious.